In addition to gathering the tools and supplies necessary for the installation, there are several things to consider before you begin, including drainage, edging, heavy usage areas, and the orientation of the turf. Planning ahead to account for these elements of the installation will prevent costly mistakes, unnecessary work delays, and problems down the road. As with landscape installation, planning for proper drainage will protect the landscape and the architecture on site. When planning for the installation, check the grading of the artificial grass location for low areas where the water might pool and cause problems associated with standing water. Also be on the lookout for areas where water might be running off from a downspout, a deck, or a patio. Installing drainage while preparing the location for turf doesn't increase the installation time that significantly, as you'll only need to do a little extra digging when preparing the area, and it will protect the new grass from potential water-related issues. The most important component of the installation when it comes to drainage is the crushed stone base. 3 to 4 inches of crushed stone will allow water, and other liquids, to quickly drain through the turf and percolate into the soil, preventing standing water, excessive or rapid runoff, or other potential drainage hazards. Otherwise, drainage considerations are similar to those in any landscape installation. Catch basins should be placed under downspouts or in low areas in the turf to channel any standing water out of the turf area and either onto the street or into an area designated for drainage runoff. At low areas next to concrete or pavers, or in troughs in the installation location, channel drains can be used to divert runoff away from the turf area or out of the low spot. Be sure to install any drainage before installing the artificial grass. Digging up the turf to install drainage later is labor-intensive and could damage the turf. It's important to think about the transitions between the area that will be covered in artificial turf and the surroundings, and to plan accordingly. If the turf will butt against concrete, patio pavers, flagstones, or an asphalt driveway, simply tacking the turf in place with perimeter spikes will create crisp, clean transitions. However, when working next to landscape beds, planters, or natural turf areas, creating a permanent border with edging will protect the integrity of the artificial grass area and keep the installation looking sharp. You can use bender board or composite edging with stakes to create the border. Be sure to measure the perimeter of these areas to ensure that you have enough edging on hand for your installation. High usage areas and pet areas require more attention to the seams and transitions because the additional wear and tear leaves the seams and edges more vulnerable than in a standard installation. When planning the installation, try to arrange the turf so that the seams are not located in the highest traffic areas. The best solution in these situations involves the use of treated 2x4s, which are arranged and secured before installation. The grass can then be screwed into the boards using 1.5-inch galvanized wood screws. This holds the turf firmly in place even if Fido starts pulling at the edges. Fido? Who has a dog named Fido? Who wrote the script? Whatever. The orientation of the turf is perhaps the single biggest factor that separates a professional-looking installation from an amateur one. Artificial grass has a grain, which means that it looks different from different directions. If the grain of the pieces aren't all going the same direction, the installation will appear mismatched and sloppy. When laying out the turf, you'll notice that the blades lay in one direction. This is the grain. The tricky thing about the grain is that if it is not exactly matched, that is, if a seam is made with two pieces at even a slight angle to one another, you'll be able to see the location of the seam. In order to prevent this from happening, the first thing to do is to decide on the orientation of the grain. The grass looks best when the grain is facing the viewer. You'll probably want to arrange the grass so that the grain faces the street in a front yard installation and the house in a backyard installation. That being said, once the infill is laid down and the grass has been thoroughly brushed, the grass blades will stand up straight and the grass will look good from all directions. So if you need to adjust the orientation for other reasons, the end result will still look good. When creating a seam, make sure the seam is straight and that you follow the stitching on the underside of the fabric. This will ensure that the grain matches exactly. We'll talk more about the specifics of cutting and securing the seam a bit later in the course. Next, plan on arranging the turf so that there are as few seams as possible. It's more cost-effective in the long run to use extra turf than spend the time piecing together scraps with lots of seams. Artificial grass is ordered by the square foot and generally comes in a 15-foot wide roll. When determining how the turf will be laid out in the project area, you'll need to consider how to fully cover the area with pieces of turf with matching grain. Let us pause for a moment to consider a couple of examples about how to arrange the seams to efficiently cover an artificial turf area. Suppose you are planning to cover a bean-shaped area that is 27 feet long, 13 feet wide at its narrowest point, and 18 feet wide at its widest point. What would be the most effective way to arrange the turf to cover the area? It might seem like a good idea to lay out the turf over the 27-foot length of the area, leaving only le bulge on the left side to still be covered with turf. In this example, a thin sliver 3 foot wide and 13 feet long. In the hope of saving some money, one might be inclined to cut off 3 feet from the 15-foot roll and use it to cover the excess area. But this won't work, because the grain of the cut piece won't match the grain of the main piece. In order to finish the job with this start, you will actually need 13 more feet of the 15-foot roll just to match the grain of the original piece, leading to a large quantity of scrap turf. Using this plan, there's only one seam, and you will need about 600 square feet of turf. There's a much better way to cover this area, and that would be to turn the turf in the opposite direction, using 2 shorter pieces and a single seam down the middle. The seam here is about the same size, but the installation only requires about 540 feet of turf. That's about 10% less than the alternative, my friend. The key thing to confirm before getting started is that you have enough turf to completely cover the area, providing ample material with the grain going in the right direction for seaming so that all the areas have exactly the same grain direction, leaving the seams invisible and creating a turf area with a consistent optical appearance. Over time, as with pavers, carpeting, and wood flooring, turf has subtle changes in color due to slight changes in dye lots. Therefore, it is key to make sure that there is enough turf material ordered to assure the job is supplied with turf of the same dye lot. As with any installation project that involves digging, be sure to call 811 or the utility companies in your area to locate all of the utilities on site. Let's review. Your pre-installation checklist includes planning for drainage, edging, high usage areas, and turf orientation, in addition to calling to locate utilities before you start construction. I'm serious, you ever struck a sewer line? Super gross. Ugh.